So many of you may don't know that actually Dr. Amr Shaarawi chose me to be his associate provost for research a few years ago. And I think he's going to share with us in a few minutes his failure in doing so. Dear colleagues, do a quick internet search for success in failure, and you will be inundated with thousands of memes and quotes on the subject. And while the quotes may seem pedestrian, there is truth in the idea that success is born from failure. This is a topic that appears not just in the popular social media, but in countless books, journals, and newspaper articles, and other publications around the world. Failure has become a universal theme in the evolution of innovation, creativity, and success. We learn from our mistakes. We approach challenges in new ways. We even sometimes learn about ourselves in ways that push us harder and farther than we thought possible. As we approach the conclusion of a wonderful research and creativity convention, we do so celebrating this side of success. The most people try to avoid failure. Here to discuss their own failures and lessons they learned in the face of these setbacks are three of our esteemed faculty members: Dr. Amr Shaarawi, former provost and the chair of the University Senate; Dr. Hoda Mostafa, director of the Center of Learning and Teaching; and Dr. Alaa-Eldin Adris, associate provost for research, innovation, and creativity. I thank you all for participating in our research and creativity convention, and I look forward to what I expect will be a stimulating conversation. After the panel, we will be presenting the award for the discipline to be bestowed to one of AUC academic departments. Alaa, this is $25,000 award, right? Yes. To promote their research and creative endeavor. And the award for the entrepreneurship, sponsored by Redcon Construction Company and presented to the exceptional students who participated in the Entrepreneurship Expo. We will conclude our RCC celebrating with performance from Xanderella. Scanderella. I thank you all again, and without further ado, I offer the floor Dr. Amr Shaarawi.
Thank you, Dr. Ihab, and I'm very happy to be with you today. I'm very happy this presentation is in this hall here. It's not in Basili Hall, alhamdulillah. And, so I was approached by Alaa-Eldin Adris to ask me to do this presentation. And I said, okay. I mean, I didn't expect it would be in Basili Hall, so I said, okay, I'll do that. And then after I accepted it, I thought, what I'm going to do? I mean, of course, you can see I have a lot of gray hair. I'm not very old. I mean, I'm not very young either, but I'm not very old. But this gray hair comes from failure. I mean, you have so many failures. So these are all failures or indications of failures. But when I started thinking about this presentation, I thought to myself, okay, this is a philosophical question. What is really a failure? What is a failure? I mean, the first thing came to my mind is you really fail when you have ambitions and aspirations. Okay? And you have certain goals that you want to achieve. And then when I started thinking about this, I discovered that I'm not exactly the right person to give this presentation. Because in fact, I never had ambitions or aspirations. I had a long career in academia. When I finished my school in the university, in engineering school, I wanted to become a computer engineer. And I didn't want to go into academia. I thought this is not the line of career that I want to do. This is something, I want to do something completely different. And because of the military service, I couldn't get a job. The only job I applied to was I applied to a company called ICL, one of the computer companies, after I graduated. They didn't even answer my application. Okay? This was the only job I applied to. I never applied to any other job, okay? All my career. So even, yeah, I had a long career, but I never applied to anything. Even coming to AUC, it just happened. So I thought, I mean, failure of what? I mean, I never really looked at, or tried to achieve something. So what kind of failure did or what kind of moment of failure can I speak of? So what came to my mind actually is, you don't have to have ambitions and aspirations. Life throws things at you. Life throws things at us. And we have to look at these things and contemplate what life brings to us and see if we can face the challenge. Most of them are problems, actually. Life throws at us problems most of the time. So we have to look at the problems that life throws at us and see if we can face the challenge. Standing up to the challenge is one way of avoiding failure. The biggest failure is not the face of the challenge posed by life. Okay? This is the biggest failure. Whatever failure you have trying to face your challenges, it's not really a failure. As long as you stood up and faced the challenge that life has thrown at you, you didn't fail. Okay? This is my first idea when I start thinking of this presentation. But Alaa told me that I have to tell a story of a specific moment of failure and how I benefited from it. So I'll tell you a specific failure. Of course, I was not the best student in university. I was okay, and I was not the best student. In fact, I didn't attend any classes for the first 3 years in engineering school. And this was I had other things. I was busy doing other things, and this was good. I mean, it was not bad at all. I started three master's degrees. I only finished the third one. I failed to finish the first two. One of them was at AUC. I was doing solid state science. One of them at Cairo University, engineering school. I was working on solar cells. And the last one was in Virginia Tech when I went to the States to do my master's and PhD. The interesting thing is when I start working on, or when I graduated and started, because of military service, I couldn't find any job except Mu'id in Cairo University, a teaching assistant, or Mu'id is a more accurate word. And so I had to do another degree in physics beside the engineering school. And also, I said at the same time, instead of doing 2 years to get another bachelor, I do in parallel a master's at AUC. So I came to AUC, that was late 70s. And I spent 2 years, I finished all the courses, and I start my research work. I was doing, and I go into a little bit of technicality, characterization of dielectric materials, which means measure the properties of insulators. Okay? So how to measure so this is for me at that time, I was very interested in semiconductor devices, ICs, transistors, solar cells, things of this sort. So for me, the electric material seemed, what a boring subject. I mean, so I spent one summer doing measurements, and I got really bored. I gave up the thesis work, and I decided not to finish the thesis. So I failed to finish my first thesis. I went to Cairo University. I started working with a professor who was, he had a very strong background in solid state sciences. And the first thing I go into his office, I said, okay, I want to study. He said, okay, get this book, Kittel, so Introduction to Solid State. So read the chapter, solve the problems. So I read the chapter, solve the problem. I go to ask him about some of the problems. He said, did you get any classical mechanics? I said, okay, get Goldstein, read first 4 chapters and solve the problem. So, chapter 3 in Kitelis, I have a question, said, do you know statistical mechanics? Read Huang. Get Huang, read it, and solve the problem for the first 11 chapters. By the end of the year, I had this much books to solve, to study. And then I go into a final exam. I was the only one taking that course, by the way. I go into final exam with this much information, and it was a closed book exam. My professor said, I put together a great final. And I said that he had a lot of trust in me. So I go in there and I take the exam, and the exam was 36 problems in 3 hours, closed book in all this much of information. I solved like 24, so I came back, I said, I solved 24. I said, only 24. What happens that the material I covered in this degree, in this second master's degree, actually the best material I've ever learned in my life. I still teach depending on this material, but whatever I teach, I can teach so many courses because of the material I covered in that class. Okay. What happens, my professor goes to Emirates, and I don't finish my second degree. He leaves, say, okay, I give you a point, I know you're good, you finish it on your own. I didn't finish it on my own, I went to Virginia Tech. So I go to Virginia Tech, look for somebody who works with semiconductor devices, solid state science, this very sexy topics at the early 80s, and I find none. None in electric engineering, none in physics. The closest was somebody who worked in rubber, properties of rubber, or they had a thin film lab, which did a little bit of microelectronics. So, okay, I'll do that. So I start working on it. So I chose a topic, and the topic turned out to be, I'm not going to go into what the topic is, but in order to do what I had to do, I needed to build a certain device. So in order to build this certain device, I had to characterize the electric material of the substrate on which the device would be built. So I go back to characterization of the electric that I hated in the first place. I said, oh boy. Luckily, it used some advanced, what we call time domain techniques, and had a little bit of signal processing and so on, which made it more interesting. So the first step is to characterize the material, then I build the device. I start working on characterizing the material, and after I set everything and the programs and the measurements and the lab setup and so on, the results should come out like a semicircle. And it came out all rubbish. And I didn't go to my professor, he didn't know what's going on. I spent like 3 months. Luckily, I didn't fail this time, so I figured out where this rubbish is coming from. I get this smooth curve, come up with a number of interesting ideas, published like 6 papers out of my master's, and finished my master's. It turned out that the characterization of the electric material by itself was enough for my master's degree. I didn't build a device. It was so involved, had so many things to solve that little problem, this rubbish that came out, that bringing it up or finding out why this is happening and developing the technique to do so was very useful. And this established for my professor, who never worked on the electric material, the lab of my professor, because of this work, became known for characterization. And my professor, who never worked on the electric materials, worked for the next, this was early 80s, until he retired in 2013, on the electric materials. The lab became so advanced in characterization of the electric material that he used to work on the characterization of the electric properties of the tiles that covered the space shuttle, for instance. And so this story tells us many things. First of all, I tried to do 3 master's degrees. One of them was the electric material, which I didn't want to do. The first one at AUC. And I ended up being successful in the electric material, and so successful that my professor, who never worked with the electric material, became specialized in the electric material for 20 years. This is what I mean by life throws things, It gives you gifts sometimes, things that you don't want to, and it gives you gifts and say, okay, try this. This is where you're going to succeed. This is one thing. The other thing, the second master's, which I spent so much time, gave me all this information about courses and coursework, background information in solid-state science and sciences in general, all kinds of basics, that made a huge difference. When I was doing my PhD, I used to go take courses in engineering, go take courses in physics and math. I had no problem at all. Actually, it was very easy. After this 1 year, very, very intensive, I had no problems at all. And until now, the information I teach in my classes most of them come from that year, where I learned so many things. So it's not a matter of what you achieve, or when do you fail, or what do you fail at. It's what you learn and what you end up doing. Okay. This is my little story. This is, as I said at the beginning, the biggest failure is to be afraid of failing. That's the biggest failure. Most of us, because we think we cannot achieve what we would like to achieve, we shy from even trying to achieve what we think we can do. Okay? People should not, or at least students, we have few students here, in the beginning of their life, never shy from what you think you can achieve. And never shy from challenges that life throws at you. It's not important if you fail. The biggest failure is to be afraid of failing. Okay? Thank you.
So I have a couple of pictures, I think. I'm not sure if it's gonna. All right, so first of all, thank you very much for actually going through with finally doing a Celebrating Failure talk, because this is something we've been talking about at CLT for such a long time. So I jumped at the opportunity. So again, when we talked about this in the first meeting, it was, okay, let's share failure stories. And I think everyone probably has a failure story. But before I started thinking about this, I tried to think of, why is failure such a big deal? Why do people make such a big deal of it? Why do students fear it so much? Why is it, why are there so many motivational quotes and cliches about failure? And I think it's because of how society frames failure, and how we even raise our children to look at failure, and how we were raised as young kids and as young adults to look at failure. And it's especially ingrained, I think, in our society here in Egypt, that it's not okay to fail, and that failure is frowned upon in these frameworks that are built into everything we do. There is a lot of research on how children learn to feel failure. And one of the examples they give is when children learn how to color or to connect dots, or even to do math, there's always one way to do it, right? You have to color inside the lines, you have to connect the dots in order. And I always like to tell the story of my little sister when she was admitted to kindergarten in Canada. And they have these entrance exams that are very, fluid and fun, and there's a lot of play involved. But she was asked to sort some triangles, squares, and circles that were red, green, and blue. And when she sorted them, she was 5 years old at the time, she sorted them in a completely haphazard way, according to the observer at the time. And she came out of that test, and they called my parents in and said, there's some issues, she's doing things incorrectly. And then my mom said, okay, can we bring her in? Maybe she can explain, because my little sister was very vocal at the time. She had an opinion about everything, and she still does. But she walked in, and they asked her, Heba, why did you, tell us, how did you sort these shapes? And she looked at them, and my mother will kind of imitate the way she looked at them. A 5-year-old looking at them like, you stupid adults. And she told them big and small. And it had never occurred to the examiners that a child could differentiate in the size. And she was right. There were differences in the size. So she sorted them that way, not by shape or by color. But it was perceived as a failure because she did something different, because that was the way the test was designed. And I think this is our biggest failure, even as a society, the way we assess how people do things and what is success and what is failure. And I have a number here. Does anyone care to guess what that number could be? Not my number of failures. All right, so keep it in mind, try and think of what it could mean. And then we have these definitions of success, right? So success is getting into a great school, even preschool. I know that in a lot of big cities, the day your child is born, you apply for a great preschool to get your child in. And same in Egypt, by the way. Some of the good kindergartens and little preschools, they have a long waiting list. So this idea of, to succeed at something, you need certain things, you have to go to certain schools. Success is getting into university. It's not going to a mahad or or getting an associate's. These frameworks that we have that really prime our kids to fear failure. So we are all really part of the problem, because success for us also is this construct. It's not, it's predetermined. And we feed this into our kids. And I find myself sometimes even doing that with my own kids. You want your kids to succeed. You want your kids to get into the best schools. You want all these things. And sometimes it may be better, just like Dr. Amr was saying, if it doesn't happen, there could be a reason. This could be an opportunity and not a failure or a success. All right, so everyone has a failure story. And I think part of this panel is for us to also think of our own failure stories and what this meant to us in our trajectory in life. And for those of you who know me, you probably know that I have a story behind how I ended up here at AUC. And there are 2 people in this room that are the reason I'm here. And you know who you are, right? Okay. And it's a story of good failure, I think. Now that I've processed and reflected on all this journey, I think it's a very, very good failure story. All right, the number again. Anyone care to guess? My age in minutes? Not that young. Any guesses? Seconds? It's not my weight, it's not my IQ, it's not. All right. All right, so maybe this will make it clearer. It's the number of days I spent to become an ophthalmologist, which is what I used to be. And I had never calculated it before. 6,570 days. And I had a title here, and my middle son, who's very witty and I think a bit sarcastic is his middle name, told me, no, change the title. You know, you're being very trite. It was the making and breaking of a surgeon. He told me, take that away. No, it's not good. Just put the number. 6,570 days are the days it took from when I entered medical school for 2,190 days, and books, right? So I thought of counting pages, but then I said it's going to be a huge number, it's going to take too much time, but hundreds of thousands, I would say, of pages. 1,460 days of internship and residency. And residency is like 36-hour days, they're not like 24-hour days. It was in Cairo University, Asraini, which is an experience, I think. 1,095 days in a fellowship to learn how to be a surgeon, because you don't graduate being a surgeon. And then more practice, 1,825 days. And I had 2 babies in the middle, somewhere in there, 2000, 2003, and 2008. And then crisis struck. And there's a name for this, actually. I did a little bit of research. It is called fractured physician syndrome. Has anyone heard of that before? It exists, all right? A lot of people in this country especially go to medical school for the wrong reasons. But I went for the right reasons. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a surgeon. I loved science. I loved studying medicine. My sister will vouch to that. I hated exams, but I really loved the discipline. I was a nerd, okay, so maybe we were a little, yeah, I was a nerd. But the process was enjoyable. And then I realized, okay, this responsibility you have, it gets to you. And the stress you live in, and then you have your lifestyle. You're practicing. It's your life. And I realized, I don't want to do that. So I thought, okay, let's go into academia. Maybe I can teach more. So I started teaching more. And then it's like, no, you have to, you have to do surgery. And then I told them, okay, I'm not going to do any more surgeries. And I was bombarded with criticism, and everyone's going to think you're a failure, and khusara. After all these years and these 6,570 days, no one does that, right? No one resigns from an Asraini position. It has never happened in our department in, I think, maybe 100 years or more. It doesn't happen. You don't resign. You don't give up this privilege of being Asraini. And Asraini has done so much for me. I learned everything, all the skills I have today are because of what I learned at Cairo University. But this crisis led to me having a serendipitous moment where someone told me, I'm teaching at AUC. Why don't you come and teach at AUC? And I came in for an interview with Dr. Amr Shaarawi, Dr. Aziz Al-Lozi, and Dr. Fadla Sabki, Allah yarhamu, and, come and teach. And I ended up here. And throughout the years, I was told, khusara, what are you doing at AUC? What do you teach at AUC? You're a doctor. So there was this sense of, I was really a failure, right? I wasn't doing what I was trained to do or what I was meant to do. And then this obstacle became so huge that you have to do something with it. And if you don't do something with it, then it just consumes you. So the next step was this transition, which is how I ended up here at AUC full-time. And I think the lesson here is that there is no waste of anything you do in your life. So these 6,570 days that I spent were definitely of value. I think that's part of maybe why I was hired to come here. So there's obviously a lot of merit to that. But seeking opportunities and how they're related to failure is that life does throw things at you. And when you, grasp those opportunities and overcome this fear of either failing yourself, failing your discipline, failing your parents, failing whatever. It's very difficult. It's not easy. I was also looking for, what is out there. Cliches are there for a reason. They're because it's frequent, right? And all these cliches about, failure is just a word and you can overcome failure. It's not that easy. And that's for the students in the room. It does not happen overnight. It can take 6,570 days. I guess if I could go back, and again, this is a hypothetical question because I can't go back, but I always use this one quote from IDEO, who are a creative product development company. They're associated with the Stanford School of Design and D-School. To fail often in order to succeed sooner. And I realized after I put in the slides that I really don't agree with this because it is a process and there's so much you can learn in every phase of your failures. Celebrating failure is not an easy thing, but it is doable. But there are a lot of people that are involved in supporting a whole society to accept failure. So it's not a one-off thing, and it's changing in mindsets. So I think that today, parents and people look at failure in a very different way and through a different lens. And I hope that this will continue and that everyone will start thinking about failure in a different way. Even at our institution, students fear failure. Failure means they don't get to declare. Failure means they don't get into the disciplines they want to get into. And this drives all sorts of negative behaviors in students. And I don't know the solution. I don't know how to solve it. But I guess it's a mindset, and I do hope that everyone will think about that and reflect on that, even as we teach our students here at AC. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I have to do my pitch too on failure. I'm sort of like tend to be quantitative quite a bit. And yesterday or last night, I was sort of like I'm serving on a board of an organization, and I was talking to them that I'm going to be presenting sort of on celebrating failures. And almost everybody agrees that failures are not things to be celebrated. They could be tolerated, right? They could be sometimes encouraged. But celebrating is a bad choice for the word that you are using, and we recommend that you change that. So I took a shot at explaining why I genuinely believe that mistakes and failures that are leading to learning are worth celebrating. So I'm going to actually share this logic with you, and you tell me if I succeeded or failed yesterday. If we assume that we are celebrating like the graduation of one of our kids for a better reason than just getting the degree, which is acquiring knowledge, and we make another parallel assumption that experiential learning is a very effective way of learning, and that an extreme form of experiential learning is by failure and mistake, because there is nothing more experiential than being hurt by doing something or being psychologically hurt by not achieving a target. So actually, in this case, that was my argument, we are celebrating the knowledge acquisition that resulted from an extreme experiential learning that's called failure or mistake. What do you think about that? I mean, I'm willing to say I failed. I mean, this is the argument I presented to them yesterday. Can I say that again? Well, we celebrate the simple fact that one of our kids or somebody got a university degree, right? So suppose that this celebration is for a better reason, which is that they acquired knowledge, that they acquired learning, they learned, right? This is a better reason than just getting the degree. I mean, supposedly. And if we assume that experiential learning is an effective way of learning, and that mistakes and failures are a form of extreme experiential learning because it took you to the limit and you learned a lot by actually going through the experience and being hurt by it. So the outcome of this is actually a kind of marked and permanent. It's not just like a temporary thing, because I will tell you one example that I learned from and I can never forget it. So by putting these two assumptions together, I ended up by saying, because we learned by extreme experiential learning, I'm celebrating that learning by celebrating mistakes and failure. I'll give you one example, just to bring this closer. I think like a couple of years or maybe 3 years after I finished my engineering school and so on, I was a research assistant in a lab, and I was really excited about research, really, because I mean, during my school time, I didn't do a lot of experimentation, and I started to love like catalysis and reactor designing and so on. So I just assembled an apparatus where I needed to calibrate meters, like gas meters, like electronic gas meters by physical means, which is a bubble meter. I don't want to get into the details. But to do this, I have to run gases and measure it by one technique and compare it to the reading I'm getting on the electronic device. So I got so excited because if I finish calibration today and I have my calibration curves, I can start to experiment the second day. And it took me so just long time to put the apparatus together. So I wanted to calibrate methane, CO, CO2, and nitrogen, and hydrogen, I guess. So I calibrated the methane and nitrogen and everything, and here come the CO. And CO is, I mean, if anybody knows about CO, I mean, CO is a kind of like poisonous gas in a way. So because I was so excited, I decided to get closer to the fume hood a little bit and calibrate the CO. Although everybody who knows like lab safety would say, no calibration of CO without actually connecting the outlet to outside the lab and outside the building and so on. So I started and I felt this fine and everything until I really fainted and they pulled me out of the lab because I got partially poisoned by the CO. I don't believe that anything that I could have read from OSHA or standards for lab safety and so on could have given me a better learning or a better lesson than being fainted by CO poisoning. I mean, that's probably an extreme form of experiential learning. And since then, the amount of studying that I had to do on lab safety and being always alert and actually identifying challenges and risks in labs whenever I pass by any, actually is sort of like becoming part of me because that was quite an experience. Does that get you a little bit of, I mean, I could have celebrated this fainting, by the way, or what is that? Yes, yeah, I should have celebrated my fainting because what I learned out of this, maybe it's a stupid mistake and everything, right? But end of the day, that was a lot of learning. I mean, and opened up for me a whole channel of learning because I wanted to know much better about that in the future. I have another failure story to share with you, and I think then we can let you go. I guess after this incident, sort of like maybe 10 years later or something, or maybe 8, after I finished my PhD and I worked for a big R&D for a corporation, and I got the responsibility of developing a technology from scratch, just from lab results all the way to a commercial production. That's the dream of any R&D person, and I think to me that was such a big thing. So the standards of this industry, I was in the petrochemical industry, the standard says that a catalytic technology from scratch all the way to full production is 6 to 8 years, $20 to $25 million at that time. So that's basically more of like all the books talking about technology commercialization and technology development would say that. So I went on and I was task force team leader. I studied well all the steps, everything that I need to do and so on. And I went back to the R&D director. I told him I'm going to do it in 4 years, $18 million. That's okay. And they said, that would be great. I mean, it would be sort of like beating everybody else and so on. And actually, I did so much detailed calculation of everything. This is the section of feed preparation, this is the section on the reaction, and this is the section on purification. And I sat with expertise in every field. I'm just doing the middle part, the reaction system, but I mean the people on feed preparation and people on the purification of product. And that last section, the person who was handling it, he said, that's a simple thing, no need to generate any data. Data are available. This is a simple separation system. And I just went along with him and did the part that I needed to do. And by the time we completed, after sort of like 4 years, completed all the preparation section, all the experimentation, compiling this into equation, ready for designing, run the design quite a number of times. The reaction section, the same thing, manufacturing the cats, everything went fine. And we started to put things on a simulator so that we can actually develop the simulation for the entire process or the entire plant. And then trying to bring the data that will design the last part, which was said to be piece of cake, available all the time and so on. And those data do not exist on any physical property databases. They just don't exist, right? They exist very sporadically, sort of like covering certain areas, but you can't use them for design. And that was actually, a big failure for me as a task force team leader, where I learned evidence and validation, right? Because just somebody told me that don't worry, piece of cake, it's available, it's all over the place, did not really make the trick. I mean, should not have courage, should not have led me to believe that after 4 years I'm going to ask about the data. No, it should have been actually right on the spot. Show me the data that we're going to use in 4 years' time, and let's try it, and let's make a validation, and show me your evidence and everything. And it took me an extra 2 years to generate that data that could have been actually the first one to generate when I started this. So I learned lab safety by failure. I learned evidence and validation by failure, and I'm always willing to celebrate that because that affected my life in a very positive way moving forward. Thank you very much. We can take questions. Agreed. Yeah, you're just contrasting celebration with failure. But you're right. I mean, maybe you can call it something else because the output of it is a lot better than the word failure said. I mean, it just tells something that we don't mean it. So we go to like people in literature and poetry and ask them to devise something else. Linguist.
Dr. Hoda, your story is particularly moving for several reasons. I can see why that story is your favorite, sharing with the audience your sister's experience at making her attempt to enter preschool. I find it very important pedagogically, I think, for not only our students who are here in the audience, but certainly for faculty and our administrators as well, that it's the paradigm that is already established. That the reason why your sister was deemed a failure is because of a pre-existing paradigm, that this is what we're looking for. In terms of higher education, I think a larger message can be shared with all of us, is that maybe we all need to recalibrate, if you will, how we describe successes, and to give our students specifically something more to look forward to. That I can recall sharing with a student that he was not going to receive the grade he was expecting, that in fact the final grade was an F. 2 years later, I would see that same student the semester he was graduating, and he came to me and he thanked me for the F that he received. That failure allowed him to think about what it was he was expecting and what he really should have been doing. So again, I thank you for your story, and I gather my question then can be, as an institution of higher learning, what can we take away from these wonderful stories that you've shared? How can we integrate this into a much larger discussion within higher education, that failure can be something that we can gain value from? Thank you.
Just maybe a quick anecdote of what I do sometimes when students are either have had this qualified, let's call it failure, is asking them to reflect on it. So when they stop for a minute and you throw the ball into their court and tell them, okay, what does this mean and what could it mean moving forward? And students coming up to me and saying, yeah, I deserve that C. You were right. I hated you at the time, but yeah, but it's okay now. It's because they've had time to reflect, right? But in the moment, failure is very painful, and it doesn't make sense, and you feel like you are, especially when it's someone who has imposed something on you that is consistent with failure. So I think the time factor is very important, and the reflection part. So if we build that in maybe somehow into students who are struggling and maybe being faced with these situations, that might be a way forward.
Also, I think it's important when we deal with the students, we as professors, we're not about failure and success. We are about challenge. So we have to challenge and give them space to breathe. It's very important to give students space to breathe and come up with what they would like to come up with. Because each student is very, very special. Each student, they're not the same. They're not the same. They're very different from each other. So give them space to mature, give them space to grow, and challenge them and challenge them and challenge. I think this is very important.
Thank you for this very engaging presentation. I agree that failure that causes growth and one that you reflect upon and that you can perceive at a later stage that it gave you some valuable learning or life lessons is something to be celebrated. And we try to teach our students that in class. And in my courses, I always tell them, you know, focus on your growth, your learning. How you, when you enter the course, you leave as a different person because your worldview has changed. But at the same time, I'm the one, all of us are the people who are tagging people's performance and giving them passing or failing grades. So how do we reconcile that in our system, that in the whole world system where everything is about framing success and failure in preset ways?
I guess just possibly thinking out loud. But I remember when we were doing some work on one of the task forces, we were looking at an institution that, and this is very labor intensive, so it was a very small institution that gave students a narrative of why they got that grade. On the part of the professor, if you can put into words why this student deserves and give feedback to the student, then the B or the C or the D or the F is meaningful. But if you're just giving a letter grade, then there's a lot of meaning lost in that kind of, like you said, this tagging. And then maybe we need to rethink how we evaluate things in general, right? And this is I don't think it's feasible at the moment, but at least to let students know, like things like growth or things like improvement over time. I personally take that into consideration, even subconsciously. You know, there's a big difference between a student who was at a C and then over the semester really grows and shows potential and tries really hard and really meets the challenge, and then the students that's already there, right? That's coming into the course already there. So I mean, it's difficult to answer that question, but just some thoughts.
Okay, I just want to share something with you related to what Nelly have said and related to what the three of you, have, illustrated. And I would like to thank you all for these very, instructive examples. When I read the email at the beginning, you sent this email that we are celebrating failure, and I was thinking, oh, they have a typo here. Should I tell them? Wala khalas, yeah. And then you send another email reminder, okay, it doesn't seem like a typo, yani. So I was also wondering, yani, how can we celebrate failure? But after, listening to your presentation, I think, this is something that we should do it very often. I think this is something that especially students have to hear, constructive failure. And I think we should name it failure, but constructive failure, which is distinguishing it from the failure that you don't learn anything from it. This is something that you really build on your personality and your way you think, it develop you, so it is really constructive, and we shouldn't shy away from calling it failure. And I think that because all of us who are, mature and pass by life experiences where we see failure and see how it positively affected us, we see it later on. We can pass this experience to our students to show them, actually, as you show us today, that failure is not a bad thing as long as you take it into the future to build in you positively. So I thank you for this session, and I think it's something that we should do it more regularly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for a really inspiring panel. I'm particularly interested in failure in research, and I like Dr. Amr's story when you looked at your curve and it was all rubbish, okay? I think students need to hear more of failure in research stories, because when they read a research article and they're seeing the end product, it all seems like so distant and so successful and so difficult to get there. But knowing that the process is not linear and that it is full of ups and downs and points that you might label as failure, but it's really part of the process, I think we need to explain to the students the research process in a different way, because they need to identify with all other researchers who are published and who are well established and know that they're on the right road. Okay, just wanted to share that.
Can make a little comment. Of course, when I got all this rubbish, I mean, this was a shock, because I did all the simulations. I acquired the waveform of certain signal and I used it in the simulation. And simulation seemed to be working fine. Everything was fine. Then once I put in the material and I'm doing the real measurement, I got all this rubbish. Okay. The problem was very easy. I mean, maybe I should say, if any of yours is technical, I didn't take the phase difference into account between two signals. The measurement process didn't take the phase difference. After this, I understood exactly what phase is. And it took me 4 months to figure this out. And my professor didn't see it. And even my professor didn't understand that this is a phase problem. Okay? Sometimes it's simple to say it, but the agony of trying to figure out, and then the solution that you come up with, and then the revelation that what you really did matches what you expected to see in a real measurement. That's a revelation. It's true. Things work if I understand how they work. If I really understand how things work, I can make things really work. This is the revelation. And from my engineering background, I always thought I'll design a circuit and I'll build it and it will work. Never happens. Never happens. You design a circuit, you build it, and it does not work. And then you have to figure out why it does not work. That's where you learn. That's what you learn. Yeah.
And nobody hears about it or reads about it.
Okay. I think that's a good point.
Great presentations by all of you. Thank you very much. My question is, I'm thinking of something about the word celebrating failure, because I feel that you only celebrated it when you got to a point where you succeeded in something else. So I'm concerned about the time of failure itself. And I'm also concerned about when someone of the audience asked, there's constructive failure and failure you don't learn anything from. So are there two types of failure, or we always learn from failure? Because at the moment of failure, if there exists two types of failure, one which you don't learn from, you may be very worried and stressed out that you're going in the path or in the process which you won't learn from your failure. And at the end, and I guess you won't celebrate anything because you won't move on to a success. So my questions are there two types of failure, or it's just about the process you have in your mind after you fail? And the other question is, generally, can we celebrate before success, after failure?
Very valid question, and I asked myself the same question.
Can I add something? Your story about the safety, I think would you have celebrated if, God forbid, alhamdulillah, you did not have a brain damage from the carbon monoxide?
Yeah. If I had a brain damage, I wouldn't have known that I need to celebrate, because a brain damage is a brain damage. So the story would be over. I think the question itself is very valid. And when I first put this title, I went on and I Googled a little bit on what kind of books and publications have been made on celebrating failures, and I found that there was, I think, 5 books from really highly recognized institutions, like including Cambridge and MIT. And there seemed to be a kind of a science or a track of study that even departmentalize the types of failure into process failure and approach failure and things like that. So I think we are still sort of like introducing the topic, and there are so many of the types, regardless of whether they're constructive or non-constructive. They are already categorized even before that question comes into play. You are right. If you are at the moment of the failure happening, given many cultures, not only ours, you probably won't be celebrating. Maybe you'll be celebrating survival or something, but I mean, not necessarily like celebrating the failure itself, right? But I believe that what we're trying to do here is to push further the awareness that this is something that you need to celebrate once you get your lessons out of it, once you learn out of it, right? And we are hoping, as like organizing team for the RCC, is that next year we'll have a competition on the failures with the highest learning outcomes, or mistakes with the highest learning outcomes. And this will encourage people to come and talk about it even immediately, right? So, because I did this and I learned 5 things, that, and this. So I think maybe we can do sort of like more pushing towards making it more meaningful. Dr. Laila?
Thank you very much to all members of the panel and the inspirational stories. It seems like a group therapy session, and we're all reflecting on our failures. And I think what I've heard from Naveen and from the student over there really is more of what I wanted to say, that the title of the panel is very provocative because it's a panel and you wanted to attract an audience, but I don't think we're going to celebrate always all our failures. Failure is a way of learning. Definitely when you fail at something, you get it the hard way. Trial and error is the most time-consuming way to learn about anything, and we're always advising students not to follow trial and error, but to start where others ended. And I think we're always going to do that. But if we fail in something, we have to learn from it and derive lessons learned. And I think this is the intention here and not anything else. So thank you very much once again.
And I think it's time to announce the prize for the departmental, the discipline thing. So it's the first time that we are running this kind of competition, and the competition here was basically over an overall assessment of departmental approach with regard to research, attention to research or creative endeavors. And we have had 5 applications from 5 departments. What we've been looking at, and the rubric for this, didn't only have like the amount of research output, but also had the structure, the support system, the vision for research, the outreach to other departments for multidisciplinarity, and so on. So this combined together, and through the committee that was formed for this purpose, have eventually selected one department, which is management department. Business school. I need just to point out that this is not an award, this is a grant, and management department would be expected to present to us in a year's time in RCC what they have done with this grant, so that they enrich the culture within the department, they push further the research and entrepreneurship. So thank you, Management Department, and we're looking forward to your presentation and your report next year. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to breathe after that award. I just want to say, because some of the students are here, some of my students as well, yesterday we were talking about in class about failure and success, and I was telling them that when I was at school I was a D student, an absolute D student, and then I got my PhD when I was just 26 and my first house after that. So I think it's about defining what success is as well. So, you know, I think everyone's successful in their own right in some walk of life. So on that note as well, and moving to the Entrepreneurship Expo, I'd just like to, on behalf of the School of Business and the Department of Management and its deans and chairs, I'd like to welcome the 5 student teams who took part in the Entrepreneurship Expo yesterday. That was part of the Creatopia performance. So if we could just give a big round of applause to them. So well done, everyone. I'd just like to give you a little bit of a background. So the Entrepreneurship Expo, really it's a quintessential example of creativity and innovation, reflecting, and I think this is quite important, the departments, different students, different faculty, and made up of students from engineering, accounting, different business admin backgrounds as well. And we'd really like to thank Redcon Construction, so May Zeki is with us today, for really supporting students not only this semester but last semester with this event and with a forthcoming drama-based pedagogy play, which I hope you'll all come to. And they really support student activities, creativity, and entrepreneurial initiatives, and of course the forthcoming cash prizes as well. We're also grateful to everyone who helped put this together. So people from the Venture Lab, Ahmed Al-Bayoumi, who's the manager there, from CLT, so Hoda, and the students are grateful to you as well for helping. All the student volunteers, the faculty involved, and especially Dr. Amani Shimi, thank you very much for giving the faculty and the students the opportunity to take part in this and really be part of the whole convention. Finally, a special thank you to Dr. Ihab Abdurrahman and Dr. Alaa-Eldin Adris for really spearheading initiatives. I mean, the students love things like this. So whenever they see innovation, creativity, activities, it's amazing, and we're all grateful to embedding all of this in the culture in the university. So thank you very much. So all the thank yous are over, and if I've missed anyone, thank you very much. Without further ado, in first place, Tivity. So Tivity are an online platform and gateway to all fitness and activity classes in Egypt. So they link customers to gyms and to fitness classes through an online application. And actually it looks like they're going live with the gym at AUC. So in first place, they've won £8,000 in cash. So well done to Hashim and your team. And in second place, oh, you have to take us all out for dinner, you know. Okay. Well done, Hashim. Well done, team. And in second place is Innovation Hub. Well done. So just a little bit of a background on Innovation Hub. They're an online platform connecting entrepreneurs, investors, and mentors in the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Egypt and maybe one day worldwide. Well done. These students are from my class, and a week ago, they were panicking and said they couldn't take part, they didn't know anything that was going on, and they would fail. And here they are in second place. So well done. And in third place, Royal Living. So Royal Living are a company that specializes in creating virtually furnished homes, so you can actually see what your home looks like before you buy it. Probably a very good opportunity for people that are getting married to see if it's up to scratch or not. So well done, team. And if our final two teams could come up, so a super well done to both of you. So we have Track It, which is an online GPS tracking device application. So come up. And the Spot, who are also a tracking GPS technology. It seems that we want to track a lot of people in Egypt, or I don't know who or what. So you can put little sensors on things and track where they are. Okay, so that wraps it up. Well done, teams, and hopefully we'll all be A students or F students. But either way, it's a success, right? Well done, teams, and thank you for everyone for being part of student life and investing in students' creative minds. Thank you, Provost, as well. Thank you, everyone. Well done.
Dalia, that's the end of the program? Great. So we are coming to an end of... yes. Yes. Okay. Why don't you come and announce that?
Thank you everyone for coming today. Our next RCC for next year is going to be on April 7th, so please mark your calendar, and we'll be posting things about this year's event and the next year one as well shortly. Amani has something to say.
I just want to thank the student moderators. You've been great. You've been in every session and you've done a wonderful job. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Can I also please thank the organizing committee for working tirelessly over 7-8 months now to bring the Research Day, Research Week, and then the Research and Creativity Convention. We know that we don't do everything perfect from day one, but we're learning as we go, and we're learning from our mistakes, and we're looking forward to a very special RCC next year that actually commemorates our centennial as well. So we're looking for something big. Any of your ideas, thoughts, inputs would be very much appreciated. And please direct this to Dalia Saad for being the hub of collecting ideas for next year. But looking forward to see you next year. And also, please don't miss the band Skandrella performing in half an hour. And I think they are worth listening to. So see you all out there. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.